One of the major themes from last night's hearing was that China did not and will not liberalize its economy following its admission to the WTO. So what does that mean for companies that are doing business in China?
I think you're seeing companies right now attempt to de-risk. That's the new phrase of the moment, recognizing that Xi Jinping is taking the country in a very dark direction where it's going to be increasingly difficult to do business. And I think that companies should not be fooled by the recent charm offensive that we've seen undertaken at the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party. You know, they shouldn't think that if Liu He says something at Davos, that that's the actual direction. I think what one of our witnesses did, well, really a few of them did last night very effectively, was point out the discrepancy between what they say publicly to Western audiences and what they say internally to the party and to their own people. So I think it makes sense for us to contemplate a form of selective economic decoupling from China going forward. That's not a complete decoupling. Obviously, we're going to still have economic interaction, but when it comes to advanced pharmaceutical ingredients, when it comes to rare earths, we're going to have to find a way to reduce our dependency on China.
But one of the biggest proponents of the liberalization was former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson. He was in your office this morning. Does he support that selective economic decoupling now?
I think there are meaningful disagreements between former Secretary Paulson and myself. One area of agreement, however, that we identified this morning is that as we selectively decouple, and I think he concedes that some form of that is inevitable. I don't want to put words in his mouth. We also have to simultaneously deepen our engagement with other parts of the world, find allies and partners that we can seek to enhance our economic partnership with. And that's an area where I think we're incredibly deficient right now. The trade agenda has really fallen off the radar for both parties. I have to believe, and this was another thing we tackled in our hearing last night, that even if the prospect of a big multilateral trade agreement isn't wise right now, we can identify bilateral trade agreements that make sense. A bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan, I think, is very sensible. A bilateral gold standard trade agreement with the UK, a post-Brexit trade agreement that had a docking provision that other countries could join, that would revitalize the trade agenda as well.
I know that's something that people had been talking about and never got there. But last night, the former National Security Advisor, General McMaster, said the U.S. never gave the Soviet Union the type of access we gave the Chinese Communist Party because of the vulnerability of the U.S. economy. So what technology and intellectual property do you think should be revoked now?
Well, I think anything that is allowing them to expand their military modernization or anything that's facilitating genocide is a good starting point. So, for example, there was a report over a year ago that they had tested a hypersonic glide vehicle, and they quoted, the Financial Times quoted an anonymous Intel community official saying, "We have no idea how they did this, but we do because they actually had access to U.S. technology as part of their program, semiconductor technology in this case." So anywhere where we see our military technology or components of military technology being used to build things in China that are designed to kill Americans in a future conflict, that to me as a principle is a good starting point. Now in practice it gets very complex because in China, of course, they have civ-mil fusion. So sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a shipping company and a PLA Navy subsidiary. I would submit, though, that there really is no such thing as a private company in China, given the party's control of everything.
Well, that brings me to TikTok, which last night Matt Pottinger said that effectively gives the Chinese Communist Party the ability to manipulate national discourse. This morning, the House Foreign Affairs Committee passed essentially a precursor to a ban on TikTok, but there were no Democrat votes on that bill. There were worries that there could be cascading effects on the economy. What do you say to that?
Well, my hope is that we can either ban or force a sale of TikTok. I have a bipartisan and bicameral bill that would allow for that, so I'm hoping to inject that into the discussion as well. I have lingering concerns about this mitigation agreement that the CFIUS process is contemplating right now. But I think Matt Pottinger last night identified the central concern. It's not just that TikTok and ByteDance and by extension the CCP could use the app to exfiltrate data or track your location. It's that with control of the algorithm, they control what information Americans get. They could use that to then influence our elections and our sense of national identity. And so we have to ask ourselves, do we want to give the CCP the commanding heights of the information space going forward? That's a big risk.
But CFIUS hasn't approved that mitigation plan. It would see dozens of government personnel essentially policing the data agreement. Meanwhile, China does not allow large U.S. tech platforms to operate on its mainland. So how does the reciprocity issue factor in here?
Well, that's why I'm skeptical of the mitigation plan. But two, I thought our witness, Ms. Tong Yi, pointed out the basic lack of reciprocity. And it extends beyond TikTok. Think about Chinese Communist Party official presence on our social media platforms, which they exploit in order to spread propaganda. Well, their own citizens don't have access to these platforms, Twitter, YouTube, and yet we allow them to run all over these platforms.
So why has the Biden administration not made a decision in either direction? What are they waiting for? What does the intelligence tell you?
You know, I don't know why they're so reticent to make a decision. Perhaps their business interests that are pulling them in one direction, while more sort of national security-minded officials are pointing them in another. There always tends to be this divide in the CFIUS process between certain agencies. Treasury tends to have a different view of China than, say, the National Security Council or DOD does. Maybe that explains the dysfunction, but I think that's all the more reason why Congress should step up and legislate a solution to this problem. Again, my bipartisan bicameral bill would allow for a forced sale to American company as well.